This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode.
We are back, another episode of the Daily Leader, and right on cue, Brad, who is a very competent person, seems to be the least competent person I've ever met under the age of 60 when it comes to his technology. Brad, would you like to talk about your technology issues today, or do you want us to just move on?
I was on a call with Nathan earlier, unrelated to the Daily Leader, and could not figure out how to open Microsoft Teams. So that was when it began. Add to that, I was driving, and so had two near-death experiences, one out-of-body instance, and then could not get my microphone to work on my new MacBook. But I do have a new MacBook, so at least I was able to give Apple more of my money.
Yeah, we wouldn't know. Thanks, Elise. That's right. We'd have no idea. And in fact, somehow you couldn't get your microphone to work, but you can get a bunch of sound effects to work.
It's a different vibe.
Oh gosh. Well, we're going to stay curious about your interesting learning patterns and the things that you pick up and the things that you don't, which is very interesting. But we do have a great episode today. Brad, do you want to take a minute and introduce our guest before we get jumping in?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I'll start by just kind of sharing how I know each of these individuals, and then I'll kick it to you guys, and you can give us a little bit more of an intro, tell us a little bit about yourselves. And also, I would love to hear how you guys met, and eventually we'll get to kind of talking about the project that you guys are doing together, and really want to give you guys an opportunity to pitch that well and just share about the value you're creating to your clients through Align. So Elise, we'll start with you because I've known you longer, and we had the opportunity to meet through our time together at Impact 360. And you've got this incredible background in Chick-fil-A restaurants and Chick-fil-A nonprofits. And then that led to certifications and full-time work in executive coaching, working primarily with restaurateurs and restaurant managers. And then you started your own coaching company, Bridge Coaching, which I've had just a ton of fun getting to watch as a friend and a colleague, and of course as a competitor, watch you just grow that and absolutely crush it. So I'm super excited for you to kind of bring all the insight from that journey into this conversation. But I don't want to not touch on the fact that you are also a real estate investor. You've got a couple Airbnbs, and you're basically the next like Grant Cardone. So at some point we need to talk about that too.
I do love the real estate.
Yes, and you're getting good at it, which I love. And then Nathan, I'll move on to you. So obviously got to meet you kind of in a weird way, two different relationships of people that I knew, met you, and then I got introduced to you sort of separately by both of those people at the same time, which was very odd, but awesome. And here we are. So I met you through both Elise and Steve, our mutual friend. You've also got a background in Chick-fil-A, both on the restaurant side and the nonprofit side. And with that, your work at WinShape Teams was obviously facilitation, it was instruction, it was coaching and leadership development. And that led you to launch Gaydosik Collective, which is your coaching business. And I also know that you're pursuing a degree in counseling and mental health.
Yeah.
So I think we should make sure we talk about that a little bit as well. That's something that Taylor's passionate about, and he's, I think, been from a practitioner standpoint really, really helpful to a lot of people through their recovery process, and it's just something that I think we both are excited to. We recently had a licensed psychotherapist on the podcast, our friend Josh Kalspeak, and it's always really insightful to consider leadership from kind of that counseling and therapeutic perspective, because there's a lot of leadership that requires we have more emotional intelligence than what we currently have. It's always demanding more. And so I think I'm excited just to lean into those unique aspects of your guys' background. But today our focus is going to be on success as a young professional. And so before we get there, kind of fill in the gaps. Nathan, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then Elise will let you round it out.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Brad. I like to say that I grew up in Chick-fil-A country. So that's South side of Atlanta, and have just been in the Chick-fil-A culture just for a long time, and really enjoyed all that I've learned about leadership through the Chick-fil-A space. And there's some really great and amazing things there. A little bit more personally, I'm a global traveler. We love traveling the world. That's one of our passions. My wife and I just absolutely love the nations, and that's people are always asking us, when's our next trip? And so that's it's become part of our personality, I think, at this point. And yeah, really excited to be in this new space in business, being an entrepreneur, and being able to serve clients and work alongside you, Brad, with Every Leader's Journey. It's really fun. And it's been amazing interacting with Elise and getting to know her over the last couple months.
Thanks for the introduction. I've known Brad for a long time, so it feels like just homies on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? And Taylor, so good to meet you today.
Yeah, we can be homies too. Real
We
quick.
can be homies. I mean, Brad called you TJ earlier, so can I call you TJ?
Yeah, you can call me TJ. Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that.
Sick.
You don't like when I call you TJ, though, do you?
I had a best friend growing up. He was TJ, so then I wasn't TJ, but you call me TJ. It's fine.
You're TJ in our hearts.
There we go.
Well, I think the thing for me is there's just been so much change in my life the last few years. Like, as you explain about me, Brad, as a third party, I'm like, what the heck? You know, it feels crazy to think through my life in that way. But I am just learning so much about kind of how I was created, which is very much like a go-getter and figure it out along the way. And there's like great things about that and also really hard things about that. And Brad gets phone calls from me sometimes when I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Because that is a part, like that's just a part of it. So I'm definitely finding my footing as a go-getter. One of those things is real estate. I love it. I think about it often. I just landed an awesome deal in my hometown, and I'm really excited to do that project. Never done it before, but here we go. And I like to think of myself as a very active person. Like, I'm very out there. I also love to travel. I love to move. I'm always doing something. I'm always like outside or hanging out with friends, or pretty much always doing something. So that kind of flows into my coaching and how I like to coach, because I love to help move people forward. So it kind of like, I don't know, it feels like a theme on my whole life. And I'm really thankful it flows into work as well. So that's a little bit more about me.
That's great, guys. I thank you both for sharing. It's good to get to know you. I know we don't have as deep of a relationship, but my plan is by the end of the podcast to be closer friends than you guys are with Brad. So is that a deal?
TJ.
Yeah.
TJ.
It's a low bar for me, but
Yeah, I could trip over it, huh?
That's probably not going to happen, Taylor, but this will definitely be the most fun podcast you guys have ever participated
I
in.
mean, so far we're bonding, and actually the three of us have something in common that Brad doesn't, that I want to talk about.
yes.
Yeah. As part of our show, what we like to do is I'd like to remind people that all the leaders coming onto this podcast who are doing amazing things are also just people. Because I think sometimes we forget that people run businesses. So in light of that, I just want to talk about the people side for a little bit. So you guys are both into CrossFit. I know there was a little tension at the beginning. So Elise, tell me about CrossFit for you. Is that new? What's going on there?
CrossFit is relatively new. I started, not really, it's about 2.5 years ago. I started CrossFit, and I was like, I've always been into fitness, but it was really ineffective. I'm going to be honest with you. It was like run 3 miles or die. And I wasn't seeing any change. So I started CrossFit, and then I did the 75 hard, which that actually really changed my world, was doing that challenge and completing that. And that really escalated my fitness journey. But CrossFit is just one of those things that, like, you're always bad at something at CrossFit. You always have something you're bad at. Or let me rephrase. You always have something that you're working on at CrossFit. So I love that, because it's just like you hit a goal and then boom, there's another, like, handstand walks. What the heck? Walking upside down. Seriously. Here we go.
That's right. My dumbbell unders are great, but my kipping pull-ups are not.
Yeah, exactly.
I work on my form.
Yeah. So that's CrossFit for me. But Nathan had a reaction when he saw the note that was asking me about it. So
I did. So
Yeah.
something I've
Nathan,
said
I
about,
didn't mean to offend you.
well,
I just don't know you that well
you
yet.
don't know me that well, but now you know. I've I've called myself an extremist by nature, which I think is true, and so obviously I would be attracted to CrossFit in that sense. And yeah, I've been in the CrossFit space really for um, probably going on 8 years now, and actually just went all the way in and got 2 different coaching certifications with them. And really, my first coaching experience was actually in the CrossFit gym, and I love it. And it's really been just one of those constants in my life. I lived overseas for a time, and I worked out in a CrossFit gym the entire time I was there, and I really loved the community aspect of it, as well as the constant chasing of goals. But really, in this season of life, it's more about the community and just having that place to go and to get better and to get healthier, but also just to move a little bit and see people. And so yeah, I do love some CrossFit, and we got to talk about it. Keep the stereotype alive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, keep the cult alive, and everybody being like, "Gosh, those people are weird."
I know.
But and that's true. That's true. I think all of us CrossFitters are weird. I myself, I haven't been doing CrossFit. I haven't now for like a year and a half, probably. I mean, I still do a lot of the workouts on my own, but I miss the box, if you will. I miss going.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, the box, right? The box. For you who are just listening, you can't see all of our hand motions. We're doing some really cool stuff.
Actually, I'm having 2 vivid memories come to mind right now about working at Chick-fil-A with Taylor during his, what I would call, severe CrossFit days, where he was going like twice a day some days.
Wow.
And I remember that his former roommate and I, Ryan, who is a close mutual friend, he and I think, had to have an intervention at one point, which was basically like, hey, how about you just CrossFit once a day instead of twice a day? Because Taylor had torn his palms open and then also completely lost the skin on his shins. And he was like walking around like a mummy.
It was bad. Yeah.
What do you have to
that's
say
fair.
about that, Taylor?
Well, Brad, I may have been going through some things. I may have been coping a little bit extra with some gym time. And I did go through a season where like I fractured my hand. I think at the same time I wasn't wearing gloves for my pull-ups, and I was at the gym and I couldn't do the traditional workouts because I'd fractured my hand and my hands were all beat up. So I decided to do some box jumps, and I slipped and I cut open both of my shins at the same time. So I did show up to Chick-fil-A in 110-degree heat with like wrapped up shins that were bleeding everywhere and hands that were bleeding. It wasn't great. That may be a little extreme. That may have been an extreme moment. I will say this. There's a lot of good practical principles for life, I think, that have come out of CrossFit that I've learned. Elise talking about, hey, there's always something to be worked on. I love that. I hate that at the same time. Like it's just both, where I'm like, oh my gosh, like in the gym, I really want to get better at a particular thing, and I can't get better at all of them very quickly, right? I've kind of got to pick and choose, what am I going to focus on and what am I not. And I think there's so many practical applications that actually go from the gym into leadership. And the same if we say, hey, community, right? Like all of us in this call are in the coaching sphere. And I think all of us would say, hey, we're not going to make it without a community, and we're not going to make it without accountability. So, Brad, to pour some water on your fire instead of gasoline, yes, you are right. Exercise is just like anything, Brad, and you can go to excess and end up like me and be a hot mess, but I think done really well, CrossFit is wonderful. So I'm mostly glad that we all have that connection that Brad does not have with you. So I really feel like we're bonding. And speaking of bonding, and Brad did ask this question, but I want to know more about this because I have a tattoo of this. But Nathan, tell us more about your sailboat.
Yes. So we're going to talk about dreaming and vision later. And I've had a dream and a vision to have a sailboat, and I just wanted a little one-hand sailboat. I live in Georgia. We do have an ocean, but it's about 6 hours away from me. But hey, we got some water. on the lake. There's wind out there, and so we're having a good time. We're learning. So my wife found the sailboat on Facebook Marketplace in Gunnersville, Alabama, and we drove up there and we picked it up. So
wasn't this like last week too? Like this was
recently? This was only a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
I love that.
Okay,
Well,
so
hey,
I
what
know
about your
someone from
dreams?
Gunnersville, which I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe the people that I know sold you the sailboat.
It's certainly possible.
There's only like 50 people in Gunnersville, or what?
Probably.
It's a
Ish.
lake. There's a big lake there. I'd never been there. It's the only time to go pick up a sailboat from some guy on
There you
Facebook
go.
Marketplace.
Man, well, way to follow your dreams, even if there's not an ocean around you. And most people, I think, would perceive that you need an ocean to sail, but you don't.
You don't?
And you are sailing now. You are sailing. Have you used it yet?
Yeah, twice. We took it to the lake. My wife's family, they have a lake place, and we took it there, and then we actually took it out yesterday. So
Let's go.
we're
Come on,
sailing.
man. That's cool. Well, now I consider you. So the reason I brought up the tattoo, I have a tattoo of a sailboat that I got with some of my friends, and we call it the friendship. And
Beautiful.
yeah, we got it through a particular time of life. We figured, hey, if we're gonna tell punny dad jokes, we might as well get them tattooed on our legs. So I feel like I connect a little bit with that. So I've got a sailboat on my leg. You got a sailboat in real life. I feel like we're really
bonded. Yeah.
Yeah, we are. So Brad, mission accomplished here.
Yeah.
We can fully jump in because I feel like we're all best friends now. So I'm caught up.
Let's hit it.
Well, Brad, where do we start today? What do you think?
I love our topic of conversation today. I think it's going to be really helpful for those who are young professionals and those who are helping lead young professionals. So I would like to kind of set up a little bit of context. First and foremost, I find that I talk about young professionals in using kind of two terms. One is just young professionals, but the other is also emerging leaders. Because a lot of the times when we see leadership capacities, gifts, talents, skills, we see them start to kind of manifest early on in the way that people just approach their career and their life in general. The people with some of that raw leadership development talent kind of can't hide it. And it usually even creates a little bit of frustration for them, especially early on. So I'd love to kind of just define that. Tell us, what is a young professional, and how would you guys define emerging leaders? And then we'll kind of use that to kind of start the conversation.
Well, Nathan and I were talking about this when we saw the note, and my gut is young professional is just that, like a young person working in a more professional setting. So there's a lot of young professionals, and I think there's a range of leadership qualities amongst young professionals. Whereas an emerging leader is someone who's either showing signs, like you said, of leadership at a young age, or who's like eager, kind of like let's get this going. Kind of like a horse at a gate that's about to, like the Kentucky Derby, like, let me out, let me at him. Or who has like a high level of awareness and passion for leadership at a young age, but maybe doesn't know how to exercise it yet. So that was kind of how we started. I don't know, Nathan, what would you add to that?
I think also, you can be an emerging leader that isn't a young professional. So you can be later in your career and having your first leadership role, that you've been in the workforce for 20 years, but you've never led another person. You are still an emerging leader if you're starting to move toward that space. So they're not, necessarily overlapping. And there are tons of young professionals that are not emerging leaders. And we need great team members, and we need people who are fantastic individual contributors. And they're not going to be emerging leaders, and that's okay. But as we talk about the idea of leading yourself, that's a huge topic for me. One of the drivers of my thoughts around counseling is, it's really counseling's about leading yourself well. All of us could be emerging leaders every day about that. But yeah, I think there are definitely two overlapping kind of terms and descriptors, but there are differences. So it's important to know the difference.
So when we're just defining an emerging leader, do we think it has more to do with desire or skill?
I was just going to talk about that. Like, is it position or is it intuitive leadership? And I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. That's what we talked some about Nathan and I did earlier.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. It could be that someone is in an individual contributor role and they are looking forward and they're saying, I want to be a leader of people. I want to lead a department. And that's an emerging leader. Or it could be somebody that they're already in a leadership role, but they're struggling and they're trying to figure out how do I do this well? How do I make that transition from I have to care about myself and my own work to now I have to care about other people and their work. So I think it's a little bit of both. And you can be an emerging leader with very little competency and you're growing that. Or you could have all of it in the world and you have no position, you have no authority yet. And both of those can be true.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I was just curious. It seems like it is discovering kind of where your gap is, right? Because I'm guessing we all have a gap on one or the other side. Otherwise, we would be not an emerging leader, we would be a leader, right? So we got to figure out, hey, is our gap kind of the competency to, right, be able to do this? Or is it my desire? Because hey, I've got a whole bunch of skills, but maybe I'm thrust in this position and now I got to own it. I got to.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever that gap is, if we can figure out, okay, cool, this is my gap. Like I define myself in the emerging leader bucket, and I want to be a leader, like a really, I want to be the next Steve Jobs. I want to be the next, you name it, and figuring out where that gap is and kind of applying that. So
I think there's different phases too of emerging leadership. Like I can re-enter being an emerging leader in different phases of my life, like maybe a career transition or a new challenge comes up that I've never faced before. Like I do think there's an element of we never really emerge, like we never really get there. So, but I think there are seasons that are more prominent of the emerging than others. And that's just like the consistent learning clarity spiral, if you will.
yeah. And you
I
can
love
get
that.
better at a lot of those things, just like the CrossFit gym, right? You may be fantastic at double unders and can teach people how to do that, and people come to you for that. But maybe there's another part of your particular exercise habit. Maybe you want to get better at rowing, or maybe you want to be better, running a Murph or a particular Metcon, or you want to do the CrossFit games or whatever. There's always somewhere where we can kind of like keep becoming, right? And keep working on it. So yeah, that's a really intriguing thought you had. That's great. Brad, I cut you off too, by the way, which felt really good for me, but I'm sorry about that.
I'm used to it.
Maybe
Yeah,
his mic
you
went
should
out.
be. Yeah, probably technical difficulties.
That is a low
Sorry,
blow.
Brad. Love you.
That is dark. Okay, something we ask all of our guests, or at least we try to. What is leadership? How do you define it? Tell us how you think about what leadership is, how it functions, and maybe even what makes your perspective about it different than what you typically hear from others. Would love to get your guys' insight on that as we talk about young professionals and them really understanding how leadership works.
Yeah, I can just start. So at my work at WinShape Teams, their definition of leadership was it's the stewardship of our influence. And I really loved that. But I also, something you posted before I even knew you, Brad, I saw you said that leadership is our influence plus authority. And that really struck me because I was thinking about, if you have a lot of influence and you're leading this group of people, but you have no authority, well, there's a word for that, and that's rebellion. That's how you start a movement, is you have all this influence, but you have no authority. And so, that's good, I guess, in some cases, but, the ideal is where those things are together. And so we have the authority from our position, but then we also have the influence because we have the relational capital and people trust us and we've developed that trust and we are trustworthy. And all of that comes down to how do we steward ourselves? So how do I show up with all the gifts that I have, with all the challenges that I bring to the table? How do I show up with that? So that's how I've seen leadership really in the last several years.
The only things I agree, I would just add a couple words that pop into my mind are humility. Like I think leadership is so much more about humility than we give it credit for. In my calls, in my coaching calls, there's a lot of conversation around like how to keep making it not about you. And that's freaking hard. It's so hard. And it's like it's so natural to like gatekeep power, but that is not what leadership is. And we've seen that. So I think it's humility. And I also think, to your point, Nathan, it's authenticity. And that's kind of my journey that I've been really unpacking the last few years, is like, there's an element of leadership that's just like, be you, boo. Like, Brad, I think of you a lot with this. I feel like you're so yourself as a leader, and I respect that a lot about you. And I want to be like that. Like, I'm kind of stupid sometimes, and I want to be like that as a leader. And I'm goofy, and I'm starting to build my coaching team, and it's been really fun to really exercise. Okay, how can I have influence and authority, but also like be Elise, as a leader? What does that look like? And I think that is actually very compelling. You think about content you consume on the internet, you immediately know if it's like curated and fake versus someone that's like, here I am, the whole human side. We want to follow those people. We don't want to follow like the curated influencers. So those are the two words I would add that have just been mulling around recently in my brain.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. It's interesting because we ask that question to, like Brad said, like almost everybody that comes on the podcast. And we always get different answers, but there's also elements of themes that are woven in, throughout the entire show. I think this is what, Brad? This is episode 25 or something. Have we made it that far? Maybe. Yeah, I think so.
All I know is we're currently above average. The average podcast has not made it to as
20
many
episodes
as we have.
I think I told you that. I think I probably made that stat up. Yeah, I'm sure I found it somewhere on the internet. I found
Roll
it.
with it. Roll with it.
If it's on Google, it's true. It's
authority.
So true. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. I just Google search stuff all the time, and then I tell Brad, and I'm like, Brad, this is definitely true. You should believe this. Like, no problem. Run your whole business off this idea, Brad. Our podcast will be a success if we hit 20. But all those are really good points, guys. I like both of them. I mean, yes, influence and authority, super important. We have both of those as a pretty consistent theme, right? But you also need that in humility, and everybody likes when you show up yourself. We can tell. I think who was it, Brad? Somebody came on and was like, hey, our BS meters in 2024 are at an all-time high, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was Corey Shear when we were talking about closing the trust gap. Yeah. And he was basically just like, look, you can't fool anyone anymore as a leader. It just doesn't work. There's just too much access to information.
I totally agree, right? We can phone it in. I can pretend like I'm more for you than I really am, but I think people get that. I think 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I think culture and context were completely different. And just leadership was different. And as that's pivoted, like from a kind of top-down approach to more holistic approach as a team, it just makes it so you can't phone that in and pretend anymore. So yes, you do need, authority. You do need influence. You do need to do that humbly, and you do need to do that authentically. I think all those are really great common themes that I hope that our listeners hang on to. And the crazy part is that I think that we've kept coming back to is like, those are actually simple things. They're just not easy to do. None of those are super rocket science-y kind of deals. You don't need to go get a PhD in it. It's pretty simple, but it's just not easy to be humble every day and to wake up and go, how do I run my company in a way that highlights other people? I think that is a very challenging thing to do. And I think if we tried to do that more often, the world would be a better place. Okay, so we sent you guys, kind of, hey, what do we want to talk about today? You guys gave us some notes back. And I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that I enjoyed that you guys said that I found super intriguing was kind of this question that you wanted to talk about. Because I think when I read the question, it shocked me. So the question is, how did working a traditional 9-to-5 set you up for entrepreneurship? Which I found that to actually be super fascinating, because I think most people think leave your, 9-to-5 to become an entrepreneur. So talk to me about that. How did working a 9-to-5 set you both up for being entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Nathan and I we've bonded on many things, which we'll get to. But one of them is we both just started our entrepreneur journeys like 6 months ago. And we both just left pretty stable, like 8-to-5 jobs. And I don't even know how we got started on this topic. I think we were talking about, it was the intrapreneurship concept, which Nathan's going to explain more about in a little bit. But it kind of is this, maybe we should start there actually. Should we start there?
Yeah, let's start there. Yeah.
Okay, Nathan, take it away.
Yeah. So there's a difference. There's a kind of these contrasting ideas of entrepreneurship, which most of us know, we think about the Elon Musks of the world, the people that go out there and start something. They enter the marketplace and they take a part of the market share. They take their idea and they make it happen. But the same function and the same spirit can be applied inside of organizations, and that is called intrapreneurship, where people are coming up with innovative ideas. They're kind of going out on a limb and they're trying things, but it's within the context of an organization. A fun story, Chick-fil-A sauce is a beautiful example of intrapreneurship, where some team, I don't even remember where it is, but they were just making sauce with these random ingredients that they had, and they were innovating and they were creating, and they invented this thing that has changed all of our lives. And so they did it within the context of their organization. They weren't entrepreneurs. They didn't go out and start the honey mustard barbecue sauce conglomerate. They created Chick-fil-A sauce within the restaurant. And that's intrapreneurship. It's where you take the entrepreneurial spirit and apply it to your organization and your team. So that's the difference. And that's what led us to think about, how does a 9-to-5 set you up for entrepreneurship? Well, it's practicing intrapreneurship within your 9-to-5.
Yeah, I was like taking notes on this afternoon and just kept like spitting out ways that it's helped my entrepreneurship journey. And one of them is like taking risks, but it's safe. Like I take a risk. I come up with a project. I present it to my boss. She's like, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, I got fun. First of all, I have funding. I have support. I have a team to carry this out. Like in a way, it actually makes you a little soft, but then you figure that out once you actually go out on your own. But there's a lot of opportunity to come up with an idea, see if it works, try it out. If it fails, like you're not out any cash, which that could be a con because you don't really feel that. But that was a huge one. I think the other thing that when I was processing this came to mind was learning to work on a team. Like truly, if you're an entrepreneur, you're most likely starting alone. Like I'm a solopreneur right now. Well, not anymore. Holla. But I started as a solopreneur. I'm like on my own. Like, here we go. It's just me, myself, and I, and God, and the world, you know? And if you're truly starting that way, you might miss like some of the conflict, having to work out some of those tensions, like iron out the natural, just working on a team together that comes from being on a team. Like those are some crazy valuable skills that I learned. I learned how to take ideas up to my boss, how to disagree with my boss, how to disagree with people like my peers. I learned how to receive feedback, and like that's a huge lesson that you might miss if you aren't in an 8-to-5 business. Another thing this is the last thing I'll say, but learning what you like and what you don't like. Like I think being at Impact 360, because I got to work there for several years, and then being at my last place of business was I kind of got a feel for like my strengths, and I got to not only know them, but exercise them. So I was like actively in my strengths, and then also figure out what I'm not good at and don't like. So now starting a business, I'm like, nope, like admin tasks, get them away from me. I have to do them right now. But that's like one of the first outsources that I will do because I can't hang. I really can't. And I learned that with my boss in my 8-to-5. So those are a couple things I came up with. I was just like, man, you can't do this if you're on your own, you know?
I love the reframe of that, right? That really empowers you at your job, wherever you are right now, to go, hey, this is actually like, you can look at this two ways. You can look at it as you're working for somebody else, or you can look at it as a training ground for what might be someday, right? And being safe in that. I think that's really cool. Like, hey, this is safe. Go experiment, go work on it, go try all these different things. I hope that our listeners really hear, like, if you change the context of whatever you're in, you can do a lot, right? And so before you even, because typically when I think of entrepreneurship, that's the way I think, is like, we got to burn the ships to pull this off. And I think that might be true. I was just watching, you guys ever watch Modern Family? It's one of my favorite all-time shows. No. All right. Yeah. Well, me and Nathan, we can connect on this. Anyways, there's a guy that one of the lead characters, he wants to tightrope walk, like hold the pole and walk across this deal. And he's doing it in his front yard. He's only doing it like a foot off the ground. So every time he's walking on it, he steps off and he falls. He never makes it. And the little kid goes, "Hey, Dad," because he gets all discouraged. He goes, "Hey, Dad, maybe the problem is you know that you're going to fall. And so you just naturally fall. So maybe actually if we raise it up, and you didn't have that safety net, you might actually walk across and be okay." And he does, right? And he ends up walking across and he makes it, kind of saying like, hey, there is a time to burn the ships, right? There is a time to go, there's no safety net. There's a time to go, I'm going to live on ramen while I get this business up. But there's also a time for, and I haven't heard it described that way and talked about so clearly, of like intrapreneurship. We're like, okay, great. I have the opportunity to work on all these different things. Chick-fil-A is a great place if you work at a Chick-fil-A to be able to do that, right? I mean, the POS system, right, and going or the IPOS as we used to know it, of like going outside and like taking orders, is designed by people in the store that just had this idea that it would be faster to go do that, right? So I think that that's really, really cool. I think that's a great distinction. So what do you guys, have you guys applied that with your clients when you're talking to them? I mean, how has that kind of played out, this idea of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I have a client right now. We're working through the 5 success factors. So I think looking at a business and starting with strategic vision and then building out your talent strategy and your marketing and all of those things. And really, I mean, that is just the work of entrepreneurship. It's being creative and creating things that work within your organization and for your people and for your clients that you're responsible for. And so it's really just a new way to think about doing your job and being really creative in the space that you're in, and bringing that mindset of just experimentation and risk tolerance, because you're right, you have more safety, you have more security at your organization, which should make you even more willing to take risks because there is that fallback often. So I've shared it with some of my clients, but it's also just kind of a natural way of approaching work and growing as a leader, is reinventing.
I have a hot take. I think that a lot of people don't see their lives big enough. Like, they see their lives very right in front of me, like tunnel vision. So they're like, okay, my 8 to 5, I'm just going to work here. And Gen Z and millennials are changing that a little bit. But with my clients, I have a hard time getting them sometimes even see the transferable skills exist. Like, this is going to transfer, you can give so much where you're at and be really present and like, have integrity while you're at your place of work. You're not taking advantage of them. And also like have vision for your life and see what comes next. And so I think sometimes it's a larger question for my clients of like, what's actually in view for your life, and how can you serve well where you're at, but also set your next steps up, So I don't know if that's actually a hot take, but maybe it's like the longer view. Have the longer view in mind.
Well, I think to your point, Elise, the hot take is that people have a teeny tiny vision. They're very small minded in that regard. And what we can do as coaches and consultants and people who are developers of leaders is we can help them to really expand their perspective beyond just the immediate role that's in front of me and the immediate, kind of tool set that I have to apply to that. And so I love the work. There's kind of two things that you're reminding me of. One is this book called Rookie Smarts by an author named Liz Wiseman. And it's something I'd recommend for like anyone, especially even though it's called Rookie Smarts, like business owners that are a little bit more seasoned. I think it would remind them of what it's like to be the new kid at the table, and how important it is to maintain that mindset as you gain more experience and just put years under your belt. So this idea of Rookie Smarts is about all of us kind of being a young professional at heart, right? waking up every day and saying like, it's a brand new world. Like, what can I go learn and discover? The other is a book called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, which I feel like I am the chief salesman for this book by Timothy Clark. It's such a powerful book, and one of my favorite things about it is that he kind of draws this it's like a classic consulting square, but he basically outlines the 4 stages of psychological safety on this kind of like respect and permission graph. So if respect is the y-axis and permission is the x-axis, the more that we increase in both respect and permission, the more that we find we're actually safe to risk. We are actually in an environment where trust exists, and we can increase the level of risks that we're taking. So for example, we might start at stage 1, which would be like this, or even outside of stage 1, which would be like exclusion. I'm not even included in this environment. Like, I'm just not a part of it. To stage 1 being, I'm included in this environment. I'm safe here. I'm allowed to be around. We would then move to like, okay, now I'm safe to learn and to explore, the relationships, the work, the parameters. What can I do? What can I do? Who does what? Who doesn't do what? What am I allowed to ask? What am I not allowed to know about? All that kind of stuff, to the point where we're contributors and we're actually bringing our gifts and our skills, maybe as a young professional, into this environment. And we're able to actually influence the environment with our work product, with the value that we have to show. And then the last one, which I think is what we're talking about with this intrapreneurship idea, and obviously entrepreneurship, but that's a little bit different. It's this idea that I can challenge the status quo. And that's where I think when we talk about being a young professional, sometimes it gets really difficult, especially when you're oriented towards leading. We hear oftentimes, the verbiage of like Mustangs or mules, right? And I think some of us think we're Mustangs, but we're not. And like, we give ourselves just a little bit more credit, right? And some of us would say like, well, I'm not a mule, but really we kind of do mail it in. We kind of just sort of show up and do what's required and kind of like get off to the weekend, But I think sometimes entrepreneurial, leadership-oriented young professionals, they have a really hard time not being allowed to engage at certain levels of the work, whether that's the strategic level, where we're actually thinking about why we're doing what we're doing and how we can do something differently, whether it's like a new product line or a new service line that's maybe ancillary to what's in my current purview. I feel like growing up into becoming a business owner of my own, I was constantly bumping up into guardrails, and it drove me further and further away from the desire to be an employee. And I'm curious, like, what you guys would say is you're coaching people who are very intrapreneurial, who keep bumping up into some of these guardrails or into some of the friction of like, hey, you're young, you're inexperienced, you get to play here in this little box. You can't come over here and contribute over here. Because I feel like this is a theme that I constantly run into with, kind of these emerging leader clients that I have.
It makes me wonder, Brad, if that's the line where someone who has all these qualities is really more wired to be the entrepreneur. If they're always bumping into kind of the glass ceiling of, you can't contribute at the strategic level, you can't speak into the marketing efforts, you can't, that's the place where they may want to make the jump out to where there are no ceilings as the entrepreneur. You get to make your own rules. And an intrapreneur is going to be really happy operating within the framework that they're given. And there's a ton of great things about having a really clear framework. Good to great. Jim Collins talks about the freedom within the framework. That's really become like a life motto for me, is creating the framework is often the hardest work. And I think intrapreneurs operate in that well. Entrepreneurs, they can create that for themselves. What's the framework that I'm going to operate in? I think that's that's where maybe some of the life planning conversation starts to come in. Is am I really committed to this idea? Am I really going to make this step and take this opportunity, take this risk? That's where some of those visioning questions can really come into play.
Let's talk a little bit about skill sets that are transferable, because I think that one of the things that we need to help young professionals do is just establish skill sets, right? They just have to kind of be able to get good at what they're going to be good at. They kind of have to make some decisions early on, like, okay, I'm sort of a math and sciences nerd, or I'm sort of like a reading and writing nerd. Like you have to kind of recognize where you're oriented towards and begin to establish, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, this is how my temperament and personality manifest in my working relationships. Like, what would you guys say at the foundation of any strong young professional are some of the transferable skill sets that they have to make sure that they master before they start to kind of choose a direction?
In my perspective with business specifically, there's so much value in like actually watching how a business works if you're an employee of a business. So to go back a little bit to your last question, Brad, I was thinking there's really two types of skills that we're playing with here too. There's like your technical skills, like, am I good at math? Check yes, check no, right? Then there's like your emotional intelligence skills. And those feel way more growth mindset oriented, where you can develop and foster those. And I think that it even goes back to humility, which is my leadership answer of like, am I, not can I, but am I willing to? Like Mustangs sometimes are annoying, okay? Because they're not actually willing to. Hot take? Question mark? I don't know. But I think there's like I think there's a level of like, there's so much beauty. And I think young people, I'm not good at this. There's so much beauty in like doing a repetitive task and learning like being humble enough to chill out for a second and like staple papers or something, you know? Or there's so much benefit in like doing the grunt work while people are making decisions. Because that in itself, if you're willing, is teaching you something. But I think not everybody sees it that way. People see it as like, well, I'm not getting to do blank, you know?
Yeah, and if I could go back, I mean, I can speak to that being a weakness in my own career as well. Like if I could go back and just enjoy some of those mentoring moments with earlier employers again, I think that I would, and I think that I would find the beauty that you're referencing in that, because so many times in those instances, I would look at that employer, that boss, whatever, and I'd be like, get on with it. Like,
yeah.
come on. Like I'm 24. Like I got, like, you know, like I'm 28. Like, let me do it. Like I got this. And I'm sure that I'll look back at 50 and I'll be like, man, I knew nothing, you know, at 34 when I went full time on my own. Like I just absolutely knew nothing. And that's actually, I think, one of the most interesting things I think about daily as I map out next steps in my business. Like, what will I look back on in a year or two and be like, that was a dumb decision. But in the moment, it was just this genius revelation. Yeah. Right? Of like, oh, I'm going to go do this. It's going to be so awesome. And I have no idea that I'm like basically paving my own way to hell as I go about engaging in this, you know, product, this risk. Like you can't know, you know? And so I think for young professionals too, there is this element that we have to just trust the process of putting in the reps, building self-mastery, building excellence at whatever it is we do, and allowing a career and a skill set to build organically from relationships and experiences that we engage with.
Then I think there's like times where you're consistently bumping into the ceiling. Like that kind of happened with me at my last job. I was like, okay, I felt like I've been bumping into the ceiling for about a year, but I had put in like 2.5 years of work, like at a pretty base level before that. So it felt like that was the pattern. even though I had a lot of like annoying Mustang moments where my boss was probably like, what the heck are we doing with this one? But it was enough of a pattern at the end to be like, okay, I do think it's time. And I had a lot of these transferable skills of communicating with teams, like teaching people, facilitation. And that's like more my skill set. It's not math and science, I'll tell you that much. Learning how the business works, being curious about it, coming up with ideas, those ideas succeeding, like those skills have just like bloop, plugged into my current world now. I don't know what you would add, Nathan.
Yeah, I would say, you know, a lot of things that our stories really, we've connected a lot on our stories. And Brad, I would probably describe myself as a Mustang ass hybrid. That's probably what I am. And I'm going to coin that term today on this podcast.
TM. That's trademark.
TM today. But really, I think the most critical skill is know how to be the best version of yourself and know what you bring to the table. Know how to learn. That's my bias. I'm a learner, but I think it's so important. You have to know how to learn and how to be bad at something until you're not bad anymore. And we've lost that in culture, the willingness to be bad and to just fail at something. And sometimes it's because you're not good at it, and that's okay. But there are other times that you haven't practiced it enough to be good. So it's ridiculous for you to think that you're just going to go out and do it and be great. And so we have to learn how to fail, learn how to be ourselves. And a lot of our work in Align, we're going to talk about later, but a lot of the life coaching work is just that. It's discovering who you are and what you bring to the table. And that's the most critical skill. Yeah. And I think for the older leaders that you're referencing, Brad, the ones that you're sitting there telling, just get on with it, I would actually caution them that maybe they should let those young professionals get on with it a little bit more. That are they really going to fail so badly? Are they really so incapable? Is their idea really so terrible? Because it's usually not. That's usually not the case. And that's a humility piece that a lot of leaders forget as they grow, is that the people that are younger than you have context and knowledge and experience that you don't have, and that they might actually be able to pull something off that you don't even understand. And it might be great, but you don't give them the space to do that. So that's my hot take of the day, is you maybe should let the young professionals try a couple things, because you might be surprised and you might actually be in the way.
If you're the boss, you can take credit because it's your employee. So it helps.
True leadership is taking the credit for other people's things.
Elise, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. And then I know Taylor's got a big question too.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you guys have seen the trend on social media. There's this girl who works for a marketing company. She's an intern. Okay. She was like, yo, boss, I'm going to get 500,000 followers on Instagram in 2 months by smashing cans of this product. They sell like mocktails. So she goes on Instagram and starts smashing cans, like different costumes, outfits, whatever. And Gary V, do y'all know him? He's like big name, he gets wind of it. She gets 500,000 followers, and they let her rebrand the whole company, and their sales like freaking spiked. But the boss at first was probably like, the boss's name is Mike. Trust me, I've been following this so closely. But I think it's brilliant. It's such a good example of what you're saying, Nathan. Like, she crushed it.
Shout out Mike.
Shout out to Mike.
There's probably 1,000 other Mikes, and it didn't work. And you know what? That's okay. It didn't work for that intern, and it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a ton of good points. I love the idea of transferable skills. And it actually sounds like, to me, just recapping this, is the most transferable skills are not necessarily what you're good at, but it's what you're willing to like work hard at. It's the one thing that can't be replaced no matter where you go. So if you are, I was told once by a mentor, he said, hey, never or always be willing to push a broom. In other words, always be willing to do the job that nobody else wants to do, to staple papers, to do, whatever it is, and you will always be employed, right? And wherever you go, like that's that's going to work out. That is always transferable, the ability to work hard, Nathan, and figure out who you are as a person, right? And do that hard work and,
Mm.
excel as a leader, the ability to, fill out documents that you don't want to, or the bag chicken sandwiches, or when you're not getting there, like that ability, right? That consistency will always transfer no matter where you go. I think that's really cool. Okay, speaking of transitions, y'all just both transitioned not too long ago, right? And so I've kind of got a couple questions to kind of wrap that up before we hear a little bit more about the story of the line and everything. But so, what does it mean as we transition to leave a positive role, and then slash, what was kind of the vision casting that led you guys to leave? Because I think we talked about it a number of times of like, okay, if people want to leave, they probably got to have a vision. So, how do we leave well? And what's the vision that helps carry you guys out to what's next?
I think these are intertwined. So I think the vision that you have for what you want to be said of you when you are no longer where you are, that's an important work to do in yourself. And then the hard work comes of actually building that. And so if you want it to be said of you when you leave your job, not if you leave your job, but when you leave your job, man, Taylor was so funny and creative and hardworking and brilliant and so mean to Brad, and it was great, and we loved that about him. Uh, I will continue to go on. If you want those things to be said of you, if you think about that, and we want to have a big vision, we don't just want to say, they showed up and they came to work and they worked here. That's not very inspiring. But if you want somebody to say, my life is different because I knew Elise, then you have to build that. Then you have to make decisions day after day after day that make that to be true. And so when it comes to leaving a legacy in any space, there's some vision casting that has to happen, that you have to think about, who do I want to be known as, and how do I want people to describe me? And so my story is a little different and a little crazy, and I left for a totally different reason than for this. And I left for another opportunity that totally blew up and totally didn't work. And that's okay. And I will say that part of the vision casting, part of the legacy that I think was really important to me was the relationships that Elise and I were talking today. It's like, I talk to former colleagues that are honestly just friends. I talk to them all the time still. And I, probably once a week at least, I'm talking to somebody that I used to work with. And I've known tons of people. I've had parents, and there's a lot of people out there that they never speak to people they used to work with ever again. They leave and it's just burn the bridge. And sometimes that's because of all the people that were on the other side, but I would wager it's probably has something to do with the person that is standing on the other side of the bridge. So holding the torch. So, I think that's an element of vision casting that's important for your transition and for your legacy.
Yeah. I was just gonna add, like, it's like you have to have enough vision to leave well. So you have to like think ahead enough to know what kind of legacy you're leaving, like Nathan's saying, but then also enough courage to actually leave. Because I was getting stuck, if you want to, if that's what aligns with your life. I was getting stuck in this like cycle, and Brad helped me so much with this. I remember this conversation so clearly of him being like, here's what's going to look like this way. Here's what it's going to look like this way. Which one would you like to do? And it was really hard to make that decision. And then you make it. And then you've like had enough vision, hopefully, to leave well. And it kind of works out, or hopefully it works out. And I think not all companies are good companies. So you need to like be awake and aware of reality. But it does take courage, like at the end of the day, to transition. I talk a lot about choice in my coaching calls. Like, you choose so much in your life, and that includes leaving. Like, you get to choose. You hold the cards of how you want to leave.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful statement of like, you can leave well, you can leave horribly. Like, your legacy kind of speaks for itself. And then having enough courage to actually do it. if that's what's right for you.
Yeah. And we were talking before the call, I had 2 competing job offers when I transitioned out. And what we didn't consider was the third offer, which was just to stay. And we did not really consider that. And so I think when you are talking about vision, it does really help to do some vision casting of what if I don't change anything and I just stay? What's the vision that could be if I played that scenario out? And sometimes we don't give ourselves that freedom, honestly, to think about what if I just don't change a whole bunch of things? What might happen? So I think vision casting, there is courage actually in staying sometimes, depending on the situation and depending on the scenario. So I think courage, is a huge ingredient that's really important.
So good. Yeah, no, I mean, lots of good points. And you're right. It does take a lot of courage to leave, right? So you got to figure out, I mean, we all have to make a courageous decision. Sometimes it's a courageous decision to stay. Sometimes it's the courageous decision to leave. So figure out what is right for us and then boldly step out, encouraged to go do that. And I think you can't do that probably well without a vision for where you want to go, right? I doubt that you'll finish well if you don't have a vision of where you want to go, because you'll just be done.
I always go back to the Cheshire Cat moment, right? Alice in Wonderland. And doesn't he says something really like kind of powerful when he's like, look, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. And I'm botching the quote, but that's kind of the sentiment. And I think that there's a lot of young people who allow themselves to tolerate a level of like indecisiveness and ambiguity on what they're doing professionally, why they're doing it, whether that's listening to career advice, maybe from well-meaning adults in their life, it's following their parents' footsteps. Maybe it's just taking, the first job offer that they got because it was a job offer and that's what you're supposed to do. I think that there's a lot of temptation to kind of abdicate some of that choice that you're referencing, Elise. And if there's any message that we would love for a young professional to walk away from this podcast listening to, it might be, hey, take a deep breath, pause, reflect, and be intentional about what it is that you want for your life and what it is you'd like to see yourself achieve, because that vision leads us down to a path of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great opportunity to ask you guys to tell us more about the work you're doing with Align, as we've mentioned that a few times leading up to this moment. So give us kind of the story on how Align got started and what you guys hope people will experience when they go through that process.
So Align, the power of Align is in the name. It's truly aligning who you are and what you're doing, like aligning those things together. So we look at, and we started this because Nathan and I have both had really transformational experiences doing some life planning stuff. I did it with Brad's wife, Becca, who is, I did tell Nathan she's the better half today. I'm sorry, but
Well, that's true. I mean, no one's going to argue with that.
No one's going to argue
I will
with
say
it.
that Becca will never hear that we discuss this because she doesn't listen to the Daily Leader. And so that's on her. I'm not going to tell her about it. She's going to
That's on her. I am going to tell her about it. So maybe she'll listen to this one. But she led a group coaching. There was like 4 of us. We went through some curriculum and it was amazing to me. And I really loved that experience. I locked in. I honestly pulled out some huge values. They still guide my decisions. I have them printed in my office. Like it was huge. It was huge for me. And Nathan, I think, had a similar experience. And so we connected on like, man, what if we could give this to people and really like a bite-sized with curriculum, a short, 8-week or so time frame to give to people who are trying to align the decisions they're making, the actions they're doing in their life with who they actually are. Because the biggest fear of my life is to get to the end of it and be like, well, crap. Like that was a big misaligned waste of time. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that at all. And so our goal is that people would come through this program, they would understand their story better, their values, their strengths, their weaknesses, come up with a vision statement, put it all together, develop some goals that are lifestyle goals based on those things, and then walk away truly more aligned, so they can like maximize who they are and their influence. So yeah, I care about this a lot, as you can probably tell. Nathan, what would you add?
Yeah, we share the passion, and especially for the young professional, I think there are tons of older executives, kind of mid-career people that wake up and decide to start doing life planning. Life planning is kind of an older person thing to do. It feels like in the culture, which there's nothing wrong with. Better is late than never, but I think early is the best. That if we can start our career thinking about who we are and what we're passionate about and where we want to go, the life that we want to build, and how all the pieces need to fit together. Work-life balance, they're not separate. They are completely overlapped. And so being able to consider what kind of future we want to build, what kind of present we want to live in, those are really important questions. And being able to sit and do that in community has really been the power of Align. We've loved this group of people that have been supporting each other and speaking life into each other, giving feedback of things that they're hearing and seeing that we would never be able to pick up on. And it's been really cool to be able to do that with them. And we're going to be doing it again, and hopefully again and again and again as we continue to serve people around the country and around the world.
I'm excited to see all the places that'll go. So if I was more interested in Align, what do I do?
You find us on social media and you see when's the next Align group starting. So we'll start one this July 2024, and then we'll start another one in the fall sometime. And so just keep up with us. And my name is Nathaniel Gaydosik on LinkedIn and Instagram, and Elise Moore, also Bridge Coaching. Shout out.
That's awesome. Now, all that'll be in our show notes as well. So, man, guys, okay, we've got one last quick thing, which we call slow burn. The joke is it's never really been very fast. It was supposed to be fast. We're going to force your hand just for fun between two things that are probably both really important, and you've got to choose one. So the way we typically do this is you get about 30 seconds to talk about why you chose your answer, so you can choose one or the other. But since there's two of you, you're only going to get 15. I'm going to make it even harder. But
Love
you
it.
guys, yeah, I really believe in y'all. So
put us in, TJ. Put us in.
Let's go. All right, Elise. I need a nickname for you. I tried to come up with one on the spot and I couldn't do it. So we're going to move on. Lacey. Perfect. All right, Brad, are you ready for slow burn? Usually he comes in and he says slow burn.
Slow burn.
Yeah, that's good, Brad. All right. So what's more important here? All right. Being or doing? Nathan, you can go first. Being or doing? And you got 15 seconds or so. Why?
I'm learning that being is more important than doing. I'm a doer by nature, but really we are who we are by being.
Ditto to all of it.
Just copy paste.
Like honestly, copy paste.
So you guys work together. It's clear. That's clear. That's awesome. All right. We'll take it. All right. Number 2, we're going to come right back at you, Elise. Results or relationships?
Relationships for me, simply because that's who I am, is a relationships girl. All my top 10 strengths finder are like either influencing or relationships. There's absolutely zero strategy in there. So,
which is why we work so well together on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm all about results, but I love building relationships around results. So I love work because you're building relationships while pursuing results. Coaching is the same thing. CrossFit is the same thing. So, but it's results for me.
That's great. We're going to do a couple more here. So, Nathan, vision or values?
Vision is the harder one. Values are so important. Both. Pass.
Wow. We haven't had anybody literally just break the rules of the game yet. So I'm going to accept that.
Entrepreneurs, we break the rules.
Yeah.
Don't give me rules.
You just broke the internet. You said both. All right. Elise?
I'm a values person. I take values, I think, all day.
Think all day. Because values, because
Your values influence every decision. So does your vision. Honestly, they work together, but I'm not going to take Nathan's answer again. And I think they're just woven. They're like a braid woven to everything in your life. The way you do relationships, work, your friendships, the way you like set up your home and your family, like literally everything.
All right. And last one, we'll go culture or productivity. Elise, kick us off.
Culture all day. Culture makes you more productive. Good culture makes you more productive.
Yes. Yeah. You stay for culture. You don't stay for productivity.
Short, simple, boom. You guys just slow burn. That was probably our fastest slow burn.
Guys, this has been so much fun. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. Thank you for your passion to help young professionals get the clarity that they need to be intentional about their careers, to discern what their values are, to discern what maybe a working vision for their life might look like. I was fortunate enough at the age of 18 to get a lot of that mentorship through my gap year experience. And I find that a lot of our peers who maybe didn't have that level of mentorship or didn't have, the older, wiser people investing in them the way that, the four of us have had the opportunity to, are really craving that at different junctures of their career. And I think that that's why I'm excited about the work you guys are doing through Align, through your own executive coaching practices. If you're a listener out there and you need an executive coach, I don't know what to tell you. Like, just pick one of us. You've got Bridge Coaching with Elise Moore. You've got Gaydosik Collective with Nathan. You've got Bara with Taylor. You've got Pattern Talent with me. Pick your poison. Depending on how much cash you have, you can do all four at the same time.
Sure.
If you'd like to experience that.
Yeah, I think that's worth doing.
Yeah, why not? Really, it can't hurt you.
You could get a month's worth of discovery calls right here, or 2 months. You just do or one a month. You get free coaching for like 4 months if you just did one discovery call a month here.
So if you're a young professional, we've got a July Align program starting, right, guys?
Yeah.
And you can reach out to Elise or Nathan on social media. I'm going to say LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Are you guys, is that like, dude, young people go?
Gen Z actually uses LinkedIn more. The studies are showing they're actually all about the LinkedIn. It's very positive, which has helped.
Good.
Yes. Yeah. LinkedIn doesn't make you like hate yourself when you scroll. At least not me. When I'm on Instagram, I'm like, I hate myself. I hate myself more. I hate myself even more. I hate myself so much more now.
I've altered your algorithm to make sure that happens. I just want you to know.
That's
Oh gosh.
all right. This conversation is deteriorating. We better eject before Taylor says anything else.
Yep. That's a good call, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Subscribe, comment, share, and then do all that again.
Yep.
Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Daily Leader.